for some other options, and he's suggesting that we may need to consider a pay increase for that position to be more competitive and maybe attract some candidates. On the finance side, couple of items later in the agenda, we'll give an update. The ARPA committee met recently. We covered some old business, really not relevant at the moment, but we did also have some discussions about increasing the spending on one area. We had originally budgeted about $20,000 of the funding to address some deferred maintenance items here at Village Hall. Through some discussions at the meeting, we and some bids that were obtained by Colleen Lake. We're looking at trying to expand that further to some additional upkeep to the garage out back and the dugouts at the park. Some items that need to be addressed there, the roofs specifically. So we had originally allocated 20,000 for this, and we're now looking at a very high end still to be negotiated of more like 38,000 to wrap all that stuff. But bids are not finalized yet. I just wanted to make the board aware of that pending decision. That's all I have.
Thank you, Patrick. Legislative.
You have nothing at this time.
I would like to add something to this, Steve. I got a complaint about campaign signs, and I don't think we have a procedure for that. And I think before the next election cycle, something should be put in writing, so there's a procedure to be followed.
What's the complaint or procedure?
Complaint was a sign, there was a second one in the yard. It was removed last year. This year I got a couple complaints where there were more than one sign from one individual in the yard. And I think there needs to be something put in writing. That's a guide. Well, how is it going to be handled? That's the part that needs to be straightened out.
Well, that was, we changed that ordinance a while ago. And, yeah, I mean,
What specifically is in the enforcement? What's the procedure of that?
I don't have it off the top of my head. I don't have
That
it,
was,
but I think more than likely if there is multiple signs in someone's yard and someone complained or someone had seen it, I'd imagine they'd probably notify the village, and whether chief or one of the other officers stops by and knocks on the door and says, hey, you can only have one, maybe. I mean, that's I believe is what it is. So enforcement would probably be from, one of our officers if there was a violation of that ordinance during the campaign time.
but I was not able to find where that was specifically spelled out. Just a suggestion. So there's no issues down the road.
That'll be under the temporary signs. Election signs and things like that fall under the temporary sign part of the ordinance, so that's where we can get clarification, but I think it's historically in most municipalities, it's a complaint driven issue.
Just wanted to bring it up. Head off issues next time. Parks and Recreation beautification.
I'm gonna still be working with Liz, Jan, and a couple other people on getting some stuff done for the ARPA committee beautification funds. And with the Parks and Rec, as far as the dugouts, that was all set for Chris to take care of. Dennis had a list of stuff that needed to be bought. And then I was approached by Bob Schultz and was told that he was told to handle it. And the next thing we knew, I'm sure Chris can fill in on that part.
Yeah, and that's not nobody's saying anything about it not getting done.
Oh,
That's,
Yes, people were during the election.
oh, well, I'm not. I'm just telling you what we discussed. here
I
at the
know,
meeting.
I'm just making a point of, this is why it didn't get done.
Yeah, I heard the same thing already at the ARPA meeting. I was told the same thing. So, but the group decided that really that work, it would be better to be done by a licensed and insured contractor, as much as we appreciate people offering to volunteer for that kind of work. We thought that that would be best.
It's not the bad thing.
Public safety,
Nothing new to report.
public works, recycling, sewer.
We had repeated reports that the GFL driver was mixing garbage and recycling product in the same truck. Reached out to GFL, they sent a supervisor to the dump site to check it out. As the driver unloaded, they found nothing. There was also a report made that there was a video floating around of that happening. Request was made to have the video sent to here. So far, after 2 weeks, no video has showed up. The grinder pump at the foundry, the broken mounting saddle and seats have been replaced, so that's back in service. Custer lift station is now fully secured with locks and chains. And the snowplow contract for 2023-2024, the bidding is out. And we hope to have something concrete by the 1st of July. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Corey,
Nothing to report.
thank you. Department reports, clerk's office.
Utility billing will, be done within the next week. They're coming out on Wednesday to do reads and fingers crossed everything goes smoothly, but I'm giving myself a week just in case there's some snags. And then next week I will start working with Workforce on the accounting software and the conversion, over to that. There's also a couple other reports, recycling report, ARPA report, and, quarterly reports are due by the end of April, so we will be getting those done. That's all I got.
Thank you. Police
Can
department.
I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Brenda, can you just provide a little clarification publicly here for the folks on how the reconciliation is gonna work on the utility billing with the estimated billing and the actual billing?
So the estimated billing, kind of gave everybody a meter read as to where it was estimated to be. So when they do actual reads, you know, that gap may shrink, it may increase depending on what the actual read is versus what that estimated read was. So it will adjust to the actual.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Edit, Brenda.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Police department chief.
It's like the activity summary, I just wanted to let you know that we have one definite and one possible officer scheduled to attend motor officer training in May. So we'll have 2 additional motor riders coming up for the summer.
That was something that was discussed in the last ARPA committee,
Yep, I missed that one.
that Amanda Lane was involved in, and we had talked about seeing if we could come up with a little bit more for training.
What is the cost of that for,
The definite one is $375 and the one I'm still working on is $800. So it's a little outside my training budget, but
you're looking at like $1,200 all in for 2?
yes. It's normally about $2,500 per person, so it's a bargain.
And the 2 officers going are currently serious riders, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
Thank you, chief. Anything else? Citizen comments, this is meant for public comments on any subject without any discussion by Board of Trustee members or action. Except for possible referral to a governmental body or village agent. Except as otherwise allowed by motion of the board. Citizen comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Although written comments of any length may be submitted prior to the meeting to the village clerk. Please direct all your comments to the board and no disruptive behavior, please. Yes, Jen.
Dan Schmidt, Novaria. There was another accident on our corner, which involved a second member of my family. So that makes 2 members of my family that have been hit at that corner, in addition to 4 neighbors. So something needs to be done. This is ridiculous, and there must have been one, Officer Bell might be able to tell. There must have been one when we weren't home, because there's car parts all over the front of our yard. And that's where the fire department seems to think car parts belong. Because then Dennis has to pick them up and get rid of them. So something needs to be done at that corner. Now it's a personal thing. It's, 2 of my family members getting hit at that corner from people that have gone through the stop sign. Something needs to be done. Either more full-time police, I know their budget doesn't really have a lot of money in it. But why don't you take some of that money that you're spending on all this other stuff and get it to the police department so that we can get some full-time police officers. Instead of just having one.
That driver that ran the light today, that was that one on Good Hope Road that already has the flashing stop
Yes.
signs.
Yes, and she tried to say Dennis ran the stop sign, but there were witnesses and said, no, you ran the stop sign. So. It's, we've lived there too long for anybody in my family to run those stop signs. We know they're there. So, I'm just really getting fed up with car parts being all over glass. Hubcaps, everything is thrown on our front yard. And it's just ridiculous. So,
Thank you, Jen. Any more comments?
I do have one more
Yes,
question.
Jen.
As a second, what is your backup plan? If one of our generators go out in our pump system? Because if the generator goes out in Lannon Estates, that's going to stop the water.
Isn't one there,
Generator?
Land States, that is in the works.
Okay, so if that well goes out, that's half the land and that won't have water for how long?
No, doesn't supply half.
Okay, at least a portion of land that will be out of water.
No.
The Whispering Ridge.
The Whispering Ridge goes out, the main, or Lannon Estates goes out, Whispering Ridge can handle, it is the entire village temporary.
For 2 hours.
That's, no.
Isn't
Not,
that what was
no,
discussed
that's
at a
2 hours,
meeting?
2 hours is what's in the well,
Oh,
in the
2 hours?
storage. As
Okay,
long as we've got pumping capabilities, we have water.
for 2 hours.
No. No,
There is 120,000 gallons in the reservoir.
that's right. And
They're
that's
still
2 hours.
gonna have a lot of
That's
people
2 hours,
that are
Jan.
out of.
That's in the reservoir. That doesn't mean we don't have pumping capabilities. We have pumping capabilities and there is a generator there.
You have to have the back plan because
Yes, there
they've
is.
been talking about a water tower for years.
Yes, there is.
And a water tower would make a remedy to all of
Yes,
those problems.
There is contingency.
So why can't some of that money go for a water tower?
There are contingencies.
It's already. in
Yeah,
works.
well, they're not, yeah, just like they were when you put the water in, right? That was so prepared. That was so prepared, wasn't it, John?
Any more comments? discussion only on updated bids. Phil from Ayers is here. Your turn, Phil.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Phil Costa with Ellers. You have a memo and a couple of spreadsheets that are in front of you tonight that I'm gonna walk through. It's been a little bit of time going through the memo is, a couple months back, you gave us authorization to proceed with kind of a thorough review of the 3 development agreements that you have currently in place. And then update the cash flows, which are both in front of you. So maybe step back a little bit. When we created TID number 1 and TID number 2, the initial development that occurred where you have obligations that are existing. TID number 1 is Overstone, which is the Berg development, phase 1, phase 2. And then a portion of phase 3A and 3B is within the TIF district. There's a portion that's out as well. The Swell development, which is Rock Point, is in TID number 1 as well. You have actual development agreements with both of those developers that have kind of required payments based on performance. And so our review was to get to that issue. Been reviewed constantly, and I'm getting calls on a regular basis from Marburg, Sawal, from Joe Vukovich, regarding TID number 2, the Ren development. So again, I'll talk a little bit about the actual obligations that are set forth in the development agreements for all those developments, and then kind of summarize where you are with what's required back to those developers based on their performance up to this point. So in the memo, I've tried to lay out each of those development requirements and the village's obligations as it pertains to each of those different phases. So I'll just touch on those a little bit. So Overstone, which is again Berg, it's broken up between the various phases as to what is in the development agreement. Phase 1, which is fully built out now, has an incentive amount of $300,000, which is paid out of tax increment revenue only. Once the development has reached a certain level of development, which it already has. They receive 50% of the annual increment up to that amount, the $300,000. Phase 2, the incentive amount is $500,000, which again paid out of TID increment only. From phase 2, the taxes collected from their development, they again receive 50% up to $500,000. So those are 2 developments that are pretty much fully built out at this point. And so there's obligations required to them. Phase 3 we're in the middle of phase 3. Incentive amount of $4.5 million, which is paid out of TID increment revenue only again from phase 3, again broken up between the 2 options, A and B. And here again, they have 50% of the increment that's coming back to them up to that dollar amount. So I've had a number of calls with Marburg over the last 3 to 4 months. One, he's wondering when he gets paid. And then 2, he's provided us with some updated numbers as it pertains to not only the value of what's being built out, which we also communicated with your assessor to make sure that we tie back to their numbers, but also the remaining build out of their development. So we've kind of built that into the model, and I'll have recommendations in a little bit. So that's Overstone. There's again the 3 phases, and there's separate payouts for each one of those. For Rock Point, which is Sawal, there is again multiple incentives that are tied to Rock Point. Upfront payment for each building at occupancy, $100,000 per building for phase 1, and $90,000 per building for phases 2 and 3. If you recall, about a year ago, a little over a year ago now, we actually paid out phase 1. We had occupancy permits for all of phase 1, and there was a state trust fund loan that was taken out for phase 1. That's been built, that's been paid already. So we're really talking now about phase 2 and phase 3 of Rock Point. So phase 1, There's an occupancy, again, 500,000 was paid in full in 22. Phase 2, 450,000, which is currently due. It's been due for a while. And then, incentives and occupancy for phase 3 will be up to 720,000, which will be due according to Sawalls sometime later in 2023, when they expect to have full occupancy of their buildings. In addition to that, they receive, MROs, municipal revenue obligations, so a portion of the increment comes back by phase for each one of their buildings as well, up to a certain dollar amount. So those are the two in phase, in TID number 1, Rock Point, there are some obligations due and also with Berg, for Overstone. So I'll touch a little bit, I'll come back to kind of recommendations when I go through the third, which is the Wren Whispering Ridge North agreement. So the agreement with Wren is, again, you have 3 separate incentives. One was upfront payment to offset initial project costs. That was fully paid in 2020, so that was an upfront obligation when they incurred costs to clean up the site, etc. That's been paid in full. They also have a second agreement, which is broken up between their phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1, 50% of the 2022 increment, which was 50,267. So what is owed to them, what was owed to them in 2022 is $20,792. That's kind of been, they've been waiting. I'll just say that for quite some time on that. Our guesstimate at this point, and we won't know the final 23 number, is going to be somewhere around 52,000. We expect, based on numbers again provided by Joe Vukovic as far as their build out estimated value, but nothing to be paid on that portion yet. We won't have a final number on that until we get new TID valuations in August of 23, and then at that point, we'd be back to you talking about what is due to them later in 2023. So summarizing all this really quickly, for Wren, again, Whispering Ridge North, they get a 50% of the increment generated from phase 1, and only from their development on phase 1. So if there's, and we did the analysis to make sure that they're not receiving any value, any incremental increases that were realized by the overall tax income district, but just their parcels of their development. So that, again, that amount that we're asking the village to write a check for to Wren is $20,792. That's the amount that's going back to Whispering Ridge. And then in addition to that, what we're recommending on the next page, I don't know if the folder indicated, probably not, but the first page that says estimated financing plan. There is a variety of the MRO. So one of the things that we've been asked to also do is kind of clean up so that you don't have to keep doing this on behalf of the village, but rather hopefully turn it over to Brenda, is to kind of simplify this, provide the math behind all of this, and make sure that on an annual basis, they have, Brenda has the ability to kind of run through the numbers and make sure that the obligations that are being met for the development agreements are being met. So Overstone phase 1, Overstone phase 2 MROs, we feel should be paid for. They're fully built out. There's the funds available, and we think those funds should be provided to Marburg at this point. That would be 800,000 between the two. Rock Point upfront for phase 2 is 450,000. That money is due to them now. And then later this year, 720,000 for Rock Point phase 3 will be due to them. Again, assuming that they're going to have full occupancy from all 3 of their phases. And then we have identified some professional service fees to make the village whole for costs that they've incurred, that the TID will then reimburse back to general fund for the TID district. So the amount to be borrowed would be $2,080,000. all of which would be coming from either TID one or TID two fund. Nothing would come from the levy for the village. We are recommending the state trust fund for a couple of reasons. One, these are obligations due to private entities, meaning they're taxable. So we can't go out and issue tax exempt general obligation. Now, they have to be issued on a taxable basis because they're paid to a private entity. State trust fund allows you to draw the funds and disperse funds as you need it over time. So you're not paying interest on the full amount that would be borrowed. You'll take the money for phase one and phase two, Overstone, you'll make the payment, you'll draw those funds. You'll draw the funds for the 450,000 owed as well for phase two, make that payment. And then you can hold off on drawing the rest of the funds for phase three until you actually need those. So it gives you the flexibility of kind of a draw basis through the state trust to be able to pay this off over this next year. But some of these obligations are due at this point, and quite frankly, the developers have been very patient, kind of waiting until all this information was put together. Finally, in the agreements with all three entities, there's a provision that calls for the ability of the village to withhold incentives if all professional service fees have not been paid in full. So that's a provision that's been, I see Attorney DeLamara acknowledging that. So that we haven't been able to fully get a final number from Brenda at this point. But if there are professional service fees that have not been paid that are still due to the village, our recommendation was you would withhold that before you make the full payment to any of the developers. So again, if there are costs that have been incurred that have been forwarded on that haven't been reimbursed back to the village, you have the ability contractually under the development agreements to not make those payments until, or maybe you won't ever make the payment. That's your hammer to make yourself whole, and you don't pay out the full incentive at that point. So again, I've had discussions with all three. All three have been very reasonable to kind of waiting over time until we have the ability to pull this all together, come in front of you with a report to be able to hopefully get some resolution for them and get their first payments that are due, or second payments in some cases that are due to them paid out to each of the developers. I've also included over here cash flows for both of the districts, and I know a lot of numbers on a page. I have an 11 by 17. I think yours is smaller, but TID number one, I made the assumption that this state trust fund would be borrowed in this analysis. Those payments would be made to the developer. That Overstone would reach the full build out of phase number 3. And in doing so, they would earn the full $4.5 billion that would come back to them over the life of the district. And all the SWAL payments that are the MRO payments would be made at over time per the development agreement. And you can see, if you look at the third column from the right, if you can see the small numbers, this district has the potential with just the build out of those three developments, those two developments, to generate significant revenue that would be available to make significant contributions for other project costs in the project plan that were identified. And there are a lot of project costs that were identified in the project plan, including extension of sidewalks, contribution for the water utility, well and tower, the Good Hope Road, all of those type of projects that were identified. You see, bottom line cumulative number is almost $20 million after these obligations were paid over the life of the district. So there is potential for significant other projects to be financed even after these incentives are all paid to both of the developers in taxing in district number 1. But tonight, my goal was to make sure you understood that you have contractual obligations to these developers. They've been very patient, up to this point, waiting. I've been holding that arm's length for as long as I feel comfortable doing. I also provided a cash flow for tax increment district number 2. This assumes roughly $19 million of development only from Ren, nothing else coming from the potential development of the Swell development. So this is only taken into account the Ren development. These numbers, again, the valuations come directly from the developer, from Joe Vukovich, as to what his build out plans are. And if you look at the last page of this attachment here too, this is a relatively small district comparatively, but this will be a very healthy district. Cash flow wise, and we expect again roughly 5 million of residual increment that can be used for projects that were identified in the project plan only. So here too, I think we had identified some costs going from TID number 2 to help pay for the well and power as well. A portion going to Good Hope Road and some other projects throughout the village. So that's a pretty quick update. As far as what we're looking for tonight, again, is just authorization to proceed with the financing and payments that will be due to each of the 3 different developers.
Brenda, do you know, in regards to the professional services being paid by those developers, where we are on that? Do we have any sort of a log or to see if they're up to date?
I have to go back and double check a couple of the numbers. TID 1 is mostly pretty much good. I have to check some on TID. I know Ren is paid their professional fees. Just have to check with the Swell one on that end. This one is pretty much caught up, but there's just a couple of numbers I have to go back and double check that came up with the audit.
But that would probably take you within a week. You think
Yeah.
you'd know where we were at? Okay.
And this assumes that we would just pay the rent amount out of the existing.
Out of the increment, yeah, you're not borrowing any money for rent,
Right.
that's purely the Emerald contribution, and 50% of the increment they generated that was available in 23 and is due to them, again, further contract.
Who would take out half of their.
Correct,
right now,
into repay the
$1,000.
cash. Correct, unless again, their professional service fees
No.
that haven't been paid and their cost, I think everything's been paid.
Yep, they're good.
So I've shared that number, just so you know, with Joe Vukovich, because he's in constant contact with Wolf and Carrick about kind of where things stand regarding their payment that is due, and I told them that we'd be meeting tonight, hopefully get some action tonight.
The finance related expenses, is this, how do we get to this number?
So we prepare, for us, we prepare the state trust fund loan paperwork, we submit everything, we are gonna structure the debt as well. So that could just do the standard principal and interest, we're gonna work with the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands, which is, that's the body that runs the state trust fund loan program, to structure the debt a little bit more than we would normally do.
So should we anticipate some cost to bond council and the
No.
lead agent though, or is that
No.
all wrapped up?
But there is no cost for a state trust fund for bond counsel.
Well, I would make the motion that we allow Ellers to proceed with the payouts as they laid out in the presentation, with the exception that Brenda first makes sure that there's no unpaid professional services by those developers for the phases that we are going to be paying out for.
Second.
Hector, do you have any comments? No. We have a motion and second. Do we have any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Discussion and possible action to seek financing through the Board of Commission of Public Lands to finance project costs related to TID one in the amount of $1,460,000.
That dollar amount is incorrect. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I went off of your first,
2,080,000,
off of your
right?
first message.
What would that number be, Phil?
Yeah, it's what I just went through, Mr. President, 2,080,000. And again, this is just giving us permission to submit an application to the Board of Commissioner of Lands. And then they'll have a final resolution. I want to explain that, just if you don't mind. So this gives us authorization just to request an application from them. It's a one-page thing we fill out. They'll send back then a resolution that'll be at a subsequent board meeting. That resolution actually is what you need and what they need for them to actually secure the funds for this financing. This is really step 1 and 2.
Thank you, Phil. Doctor?
Just some background information. Has the interest rate been negotiated, the floating rate? Is there any processing fee that the state trust fund charges?
No processing fee for the state trust fund. Like the market, they're moving all over the place these days. They're a fixed fee, but they move rates. Kind of on a whim, if you will, at the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands. They meet monthly. And every month they discuss where they're gonna come out with rates. So recently they were at 5%, they went to 5.5%, they've come back to 5.25%. That's what I've used in years, the 5.25%, which is the most recent rate. If we get an application submitted like tomorrow, we'll lock into that 5.25%. If they go down, the Board of Commissioner of Public Lands will give you the lower rate.
And when you say lock in, what is the repayment period?
Oh, we were looking at a 10-year note on this.
And is there any borrowing limit that the village has to be sensitive to as it looks at other TIP obligations?
Yeah, there's plenty of borrowing capacity at this point. I think the bigger issue is gonna be when you take out financing for the utilities. I think that'll be there's no borrowing restriction, it's whether or not you actually have the rates in place and the revenues available to make debt service on future well and tower borrowings. That'll be more of the constraint, I think.
Won't those be revenue bonds?
There'll be revenue bonds,
Yeah.
not coming against the borrowing
Get
capacity.
it from the state trust fund. Right?
No, they'll be getting those through private clean water and safe drinking water fund, I'm assuming.
Any more questions?
I'll make a motion to allow Ellers to apply for the application in the dollar amount of $2,080,000 for the TID one items.
We have a motion and second. Do you have any more discussion? Any comments, Secretary?
Trustee Reed just mentioned TID one. Are you not asking for contingent application for this wall, Rock Point, yeah?
The only TID one is Rock Point and Overstone. This is the financing for that. Ren is gonna be paid out of bid cash.
Cash.
Yeah, so this is only TID one.
Thank you.
And that'll be our next agenda item. The REM will be.
Any more discussion? Have a motion and second, all in favor, opposed, motion carried. Discussion and possible action to approve the MRO payment to Ren.
I'll make a motion that we make the payment to Ren, from available funds.
We have a motion and second. Any more discussion? Hector,
I think there should be a number associated with that.
For the amount of 20,000. 792.
we have an amended motion. Do we have an amendment?
My second.
Thank you. Do you have any more discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Discussion and possible action on tree removal.
The Waukesha County has come through and said they want us to trim that tree out here in front of the stop and go light. And it was mentioned by a couple of board members that maybe we should just get rid of it because to clear 12 foot up from the ground level on that one side would kind of flatten it out completely. And it's a little bit hard to work on the control panels with that there. That being said, Cut and Go was asked for a price to, and you've got that in front of you, to remove the lights that are on board the tree right now and preserve them for use at a later time. To remove the tree. And then to cut the tree trunk in 4 foot sections. And the wood and the chips would be placed back here next to the garage for residents to take at will until they're gone. The entire cost, and including stump removal, of $1,600.
I'll make a motion that we approve the cut and go estimate of $1,688. That's with the tax, unless we're tax exempt.
We are tax
Okay.
exempt.
That's what I figured, but I had to check. So yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the estimate from cut and go for the tree removal.
We have a motion and second. Do we have any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Discussion and possible action on payment of the bills.
Make a motion to pay the bills as submitted by the clerk.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any more discussion? Brenda,
What?
any more discussion?
Do you want some?
You wanted to make sure.
What's on your face?
We have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Engineers report.
Just a few things to report on. So for Willow Lane, we've reached out and gotten, reached out to the title company. We're waiting to hear back on title searches, but just know that, you know, that's being worked on, looked at. You'll recall through the winter, there were complaints about some of the, new pavement heaving in various areas for the water project. And Patrick had pointed out that we need to go back and check on the restoration. So we're kind of thinking after this week of good warm weather, we'll go back and do another check on all of those issues all at once and kind of generate what we think the contractor should come back and take care of or not, et cetera. The USDA contingency funding over the course of the last couple meetings, Public Works and Village Board, we've talked about contingency projects, including generators. So Strand had a meeting this morning with your operator Mid-City. We still got to just pin down like what is the final preference at Lincoln State for backup power. But anyhow, we've kind of divvied up that contingency project list into what can just be direct purchase versus what's going to require plans or specs or whatever. So we anticipate having a meeting with USDA some point within the next week to notify them this is the game plan to spend the contingency fund and kind of get their feedback on that before proceeding with those items. Concerning the comment during public comments on crash histories, so you know, both of those roads are county roads, and I know the comment was not directed at doing any type of construction there per se, but no, I can't stress enough how much I think some of these issues, whether it be the speed limit on Main Street, which is an ongoing issue, or some of the issues over here. When we have talked to other staff at the county, put it politely, have not been openly received. I think folks need to, you can look up on Waukesha County, what your county supervisor's contact information is. Quite honestly, we've had some interaction with the county executive's office too, and it's kicked back down to staffers and kind of. There's not a real clear way to communicate these things, so I provided President Summers his contact information for who the county supervisor is, and highly encourage folks on any issues with Main Street and Good Hope Road to reach out. That's all I have. Yes.
Do you recall the name of the supervisor?
I do not.
No.
I do not.
One thing that I know other communities have done, because somehow, unfortunately, the county governance process operates in its own orbit. Invited county supervisors to attend a regular board meeting to give an update on the upcoming issues that the county is facing and how that supervisor anticipates that it's going to impact the community. And there oftentimes is a brief discussion period and questions with regards to safety in the community, particularly with regards to county highways, can be brought up and pressed and pursued.
Yes. One other follow-up on that, should there be a engineering / construction solution to any of these problems? The DOT made a lot of money available through the bipartisan infrastructure law specific for safety improvements, HSIP, Highway Safety Improvement Program. It's a designated fund within DOT that's funded by BIL just for safety issues. And there's another one called the TAP grants, TAP, Transportation Alternative Program. If there's pedestrian accommodations or need for that. The trick is, I think I've said this at meetings before. Landon's issues are mostly in areas that are under county jurisdiction. When I've talked to the county, they've said, you know, if Landon wants to be the sponsor, because these projects require 20% local funding and 80% federal funding. The county is not necessarily, Landon's not high enough on their very long list of projects throughout the entire county. There aren't priority enough, but they said if Landon was willing to be the sponsor for some, like the 20% share, then they would, you know, kind of co-sponsor it or whatever. Basically, let Landon do the project in their right of way. So these are all things that aren't going to get solved at one meeting per se, but I just want you to know there's some things out there.
You mentioned the USDA contingency, in your meeting, did you happen to, touch base on where that stands in terms of the balance?
Yeah, it's about 990,000.
Yes, sir.
Is there some way to determine how many residents have not been hooked up and have declined to participate?
There is a way to determine that. I don't have that number at hand.
I would recommend to the board that that matter was given some attention, at least by the end of the summer. So that, you can give, our office direction as to an enforcement issue. My recollection was that the last time the subject matter came up, it was less than 10 parties. Or-
Yeah, and the reason why the number is a little slippery is because there's probably a group of genuine holdouts that are out there. There's another group that I would put, say, the BP gas station and Payne and Dolan in, where just due to complex construction issues, they're still not connected. So there's making progress. And then we just discovered there's a whole other group of people out there that have been hooked up, but the water meter was never installed. And it kind of in the group or in the switch between Menominee Falls providing the meters, the meters shortages, and now Sussex doing it. I think there's a little, we gotta reconcile Mid-City's install list with the actual billing list, which is based, Brenda's billing list is based on meters. Besides that, so all in total, we're estimating between 10 and 20. And about 5 or 10 of those are probably connected and don't have a meter. About, I would guess, 2 to 5 of those are just waiting on, like, the Payne and Dolan situation, waiting for construction, and then probably 10 or less are genuinely like unwilling to connect.
So there is some ongoing construction work still.
Yep. Yeah, so the one example was Payne and Dolan and BP. We had to get the legal easement in place to run the pipe down the bug lane. It was more cost effective based on very site specific conditions to install a new lateral down the bug line that was to use the existing lateral that was stubbed out on Main Street for those 2 properties. So those have been installed but not tapped at the main yet, and they got to come back and do the private property work then once they do get installed.
And then there's 4 Custer Lane
Correct.
properties up there that got some ongoing challenges there.
Yep.
But there is, Mid-City has a list, an active list that they're supposedly updating on a regular basis with status and, you know, inspection and permit clearing information and all that stuff that they're continuing to work through, but I mean, as you can imagine, the number of properties in the village is probably a small percentage of error in that.
Anything else for Ben?
I guess if you could reach out to Mid-City and see if you can get that list, so we can give that to Hector, and if there's any action we need to start, get the ball rolling, we can do that.
I have access to that.
We do?
list.
Okay,
I've
perfect.
occasionally shared that data.
Attorney's report. Gary,
I have a point of order on item number 9. It's listed agendized as discussion only. If you had a motion and action. The law dog.
Which was really kind of a motion for the next agenda item.
The gun on.
9 wasn't really, 9 was really discussion leading to 10, 11, 12. Or
But you also had a motion on
10,
10, so I don't know. Combine them or whatever Hector says.
Well, it is within the authority of the board to amend the agenda. And the first thing that I think needs to be amended is the monetary amount for item 10 We should be 2,080,000. Yes,
In the, in our, motion, we did.
you did
Yes.
make the right, no,
Yes.
so. I think, just making the amendment to the agenda will cover that situation. And. I don't believe that there's any need to take any further action, given that the board has already taken action to address these items.
So everything is good now.
Yes, with the modification of the agenda. If somebody would just make a motion to that effect.
Steve, do you want to?
What's the motion? We need to
Make a motion to amend the agenda.
Oh, I'll make a motion,
Item, yeah.
I'll make a motion to amend the item number 10 in the dollar amount of $2,080,000.
What's the second, Steve?
Was that?
Did you second your next one?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion by Steve, a second by Ron. To amend agenda item 10 to $2,080,000. We have any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Attorney's report,
No report.
my report. Congratulations to trustee Patrick Yates on being elected village president. I now urge you and the board to keep up the positives that were accomplished the last 2 years. We have opened up the board meetings by welcoming comments and input to the village board from all persons. We have eliminated the need for 2 trustee signatures as a condition of accepting citizen complaints to be followed up by the village. We have altered the posting of regular board meeting agenda notices to allow for a week's posting with the goal of trying to be transparent by allowing residents to plan to learn about and comment on matters that concern them. We have attempted to appoint experienced individuals to our plan commission in an effort to be more responsive to community concerns and to seek accountability as required by our ordinances and development agreement. So I look back at my term in office, I'm proud of the fact I've always tried to be a leader, not a ruler. I've returned every phone call, email, and inquiry that I have received. I've personally visited almost everyone submitting a complaint so that I would have a firsthand assessment of a situation with my own eyes. I've always treated my fellow board members and residents with honesty and respect, even when I did not necessarily receive that in return. That I had a role in starting the community Christmas meal and was on a planning group for the awareness walk. That I promoted as best as I could and participated in every community event except the 2 that I was requested to not attend. That I requested a remote monitoring system at the Whispering Ridge Pump House and urged the addition of a system for Lannon Estates well also. That flooding occurrences at Lannon Estates were significantly reduced after several years of unsuccessful investigations by previous boards. That I advocated for maintenance programs to be implemented for the pump houses and emergency generator, and also suggested a standby generator for the Lannon Estates well. I strongly supported the establishment of a SCADA system for all our remote monitoring programs, as well as installing connections for portable generators at the lift stations, the new ones, so that they were all set up in a uniform manner in case of emergencies. I lobbied for the installation of pressure reducing valves being installed in Lannon Estates so that system could operate at a more uniform pressure and hopefully avoiding a major service disruption for 161 families living in that development. Once I took office, I earnestly attempted to educate myself about all of the issues associated with the installation of the village water system in an effort to avoid lending support to any effort intended to impede its installation and activation. I sincerely believe that the state of affairs in our village of Lannon is much improved over what it was 2 years ago. This is because of the work of many, including some that are continuing on the village board. It is my hope that we will see a reduction of the harshness amongst our residents that we have witnessed on social media. All of us should be better than what has been spewed in the past. I believe that I never lost sight of my goal when I ran for office, which was to be respectful and honest with everyone. To that end, I attempted to treat all equally without playing favorites. I wish to thank the citizens of Lannon for having given me the opportunity to serve as your president. There are challenges facing Lannon, and I wish President-elect Yates success in meeting them all. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Make a motion to adjourn the last meeting.
Second.
Motion and second, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.
Here again.